Hi, I'm Chelsea, a Jet ALT living in a small rural town in Kagoshima, Japan. It's been 1 month since I've moved here, and I wanted to share some of the experiences and lessons that I've learned since moving here. First, please remember that every situation is different. Please use my reflections as a reference for what's possible, but of course not universal for every ALT. Let's start with moving logistics. So moving in itself is already a difficult and time-consuming process. Moving to another country just adds so much more complexity to that, and then if you don't speak the language and can't read anything, it's a hell of a daunting task. After finishing quarantine, I flew to my hometown and the whole day was scheduled for sorting out logistics. So I registered as a resident in my city, I met the mayor and the superintendent, I opened a bank account, I met my coworkers, and I also got to move into my apartment, which luckily was clean, furnished, and in relatively good condition. I'll get into what the rest of my first week was like, but by the end of the first week, my supervisor and I visited a local car shop to find a car for me to lease. I don't know how long I'm planning to be in Japan yet, so I didn't want to invest a lot of money into buying a used car. Buying a car and owning a car in Japan is quite expensive. There are two really important things. One is shaken, which is the 2-year mandatory vehicle inspection, and the second is hoken, which is your car insurance. So after visiting the car shop, it took about a week for them to find a car that they could lease for me, and another week for them to prepare it before I actually got the keys. And I got a really cute little car. It's called a K car in Japan. It has a smaller engine and only seats 4 people, like hardly any trunk, but it's really cute and it's perfect. I really didn't have any preference in color or car brand, so it's perfect for me. So setting up utilities was a really time-consuming and quite frustrating process. I don't speak Japanese, so I couldn't handle setting those things up on my own. So after my days were done and I returned back to my office, I sat with my supervisor as she made the calls to try to figure out my home internet as well as my electricity provider. And that took maybe, just doing internet took 3 days of calls, maybe like 1.5 to 2 hours each. And it was really frustrating, and home internet takes quite a while to set up here in Japan, so I would definitely recommend when you get here getting a Japanese SIM and getting a mobile data plan so that you can have internet for those first couple of weeks, because it's gonna take that long to get internet at home. So my apartment was furnished, but I wanted to replace some of the older furniture. I had this old sofa bed, but it wasn't very comfortable for me and I wasn't really using this room that I'm sitting in right now. After I got my car, I drove to a nearby city that was much larger and had secondhand shops and furniture stores to find a couch. I found this gray 3-person couch, but it didn't fit into my little car. I was quite stressed out trying to figure out how to get it home, but luckily my supervisor's husband had a K-truck, which is a small flatbed truck that is quite popular here in my area and in Japan, and he was very gracious with his time to go and pick it up for me and then to bring it back here and help me move it into my apartment. So I got very lucky with that. Trash disposal is quite robust in my home city, much more so than in the States, and it took me a while to decrypt all of the different rules. You have burnable trash, plastics, PET bottles, paper and cardboard, and all of those things go out on different days of the week at different frequencies and have to be placed in specific colored garbage bags. You also write your name on your garbage bag and drop it off at a shared disposal location, and if your trash in those bags is incorrect, it might just end up back on your doorstep. Thankfully, that hasn't happened to me yet, but I did have my supervisor come over a few times while I was setting stuff up in my first couple of weeks, and she helped me make sure that my trash was properly sorted, which is quite an intimate experience having someone go through your trash. There's so much to figure out when you first get here, and you will make a lot of mistakes. I have made a lot of mistakes. My first day of walking around, I had dress shoes that were brand new, they were flats, but I hadn't broken them in yet, so I had these horrible blisters on my feet that were open and a little bloody. And the week after, I was limping because I didn't have proper shoes. When I activated my SIM card, I couldn't activate the data on it, and I didn't have internet for 2 days. A few weeks after I got my car, I put gas in it on my own for the first time, and I put the wrong gas. I put diesel in my car instead of regular fuel, and so I had to get it towed and pay for gas twice because they emptied my tank, and then I had to go and fill it up again. Let's talk about the Japanese language. Prior to getting here, I had taken a semester of introductory Japanese, and that gave me language to say greetings, to speak very simple sentences, and to read hiragana and katakana very slowly. That semester of Japanese was of course not sufficient enough to me being here and actually having conversations with people, especially complex conversations about setting up utilities. But thankfully, people are quite understanding that I don't speak much Japanese, so they'll speak simpler Japanese to me. They tend to ask similar questions like, when did you arrive to Japan? And what do you think of Japan? Do you like Japanese food? My first few weeks of being here were mentally exhausting because I was seeing Japanese that I couldn't read, hearing Japanese that I couldn't understand, and feeling frustrated that I didn't have the language to be able to communicate back to people. So I just felt overwhelmed, and by the time I got home, I just didn't want to hear any Japanese. Google Translate has been my best friend. It's not perfect, and it takes 2 to 3 times longer to have a normal conversation, but it definitely works. Since I've arrived, I've made it a priority to level up my listening comprehension and feel more confident saying full sentences in Japanese. I watched a couple of videos that I'll link below that helped me get into that mindset of how do you learn a language quickly in order to communicate well with the folks around you. I'm also prioritizing memorizing vocabulary so that I can recognize words more quickly. I used Duolingo for 2 weeks to get some vocabulary under my belt, but it felt really repetitive and like I wasn't making progress fast enough, so I moved on from that. I also use the Genki 1 textbooks in my Japanese class, and recently I've been using Wanikani, which is a kanji learning website that uses a technique called spaced repetition to allow you to memorize kanji more quickly. It's nice being able to read things, but it also just, again, ups my vocabulary so I recognize words in conversation. I will study during my down periods in between classes to go over my Genki textbook, and also if there's any reviews from Wanikani, I will go over those as well. I'm trying to stay on top of those so that I can progress as quickly as possible. Finally, I've been taking Japanese lessons from a local teacher once a week. The lessons are about an hour and a half, and it's a great opportunity for me to get more conversational, have opportunities for small talk, and help me feel more comfortable speaking. So ALTs are assistant language teachers, so what is school actually like? First of all, school has just been really fun, also really exhausting. So I rotate between 5 elementary schools, 2 junior high schools, and once a semester I will visit a kindergarten class. During my first week, after that first day of sorting out logistics, I visited each of my schools with my supervisor, and I met the principals, or Kocho sensei, and vice principals, or Kyoto sensei, and gave a formal introduction of myself. Also in my first week, I got to shadow another ALT in my town, and I visited a kindergarten, a elementary school, and a junior high school with him. And that was a really great opportunity for me to understand what the classroom environment is like, what the pacing is like, how long the classes are, and what is the general structure of teaching a lesson. It was super insightful and helped me feel a lot more comfortable when I went to schools on my own. The next time I returned to my schools, I also wore my business suit, and I also got to meet my students for the first time. Some of the schools had a welcome assembly on my behalf where Kojo sensei would introduce me, and I would also give a short introduction of myself in Japanese. The first time I met with a class, I gave my self-introduction lesson, also known as Jikushokai. This is a lesson that I get to share about myself, my likes, my interests, as well as what home is like for me. I talked about the US and predominantly Southern California. I definitely got better at giving my Jikushokai every time I gave it to adjust to my students' level of English comprehension, as well as how to engage them in my presentation every time. Even after a month of being here, I still give this lesson because I visit so many schools and I don't see every single class every time I come to school. One of the really cool things is I'm learning the differences between Japanese schools and American schools, from their daily schedule to student expectations to classroom culture. My favorite part of school is getting to interact with the kids. After lunch, they have a recess for about 45 minutes, and I always go outside to go play with them and interact with them. They are so fun and curious, and they'll speak to me in Japanese, of course, and most of the time they don't know that I can't speak Japanese. As they pick that up, they'll repeat things over again. They'll speak more slowly. Play and fun are pretty universal for kids, so the fact that I can do that for them and really gain their trust and not feel so scary to them is a huge relief for me. This job can be physically and mentally draining. I was very privileged to get to work from home during the pandemic, and my life was pretty sedentary, so it's been a huge shift to then be on my feet for 6 to 8 hours a day, even though that's probably the best for my body. I'm slowly picking up on social cues and understanding how people react to me as a foreigner, also trying to decode some of the subtext that is prevalent in all of Japanese communication. It's quite an indirect form of communicating, so it's something I'm learning to understand. As an American and in Western cultures, it's often very direct. Some other things that I've thought about since being here in Japan is traveling. I really like to travel, and I finally am here in Japan, something that I've been dreaming about for such a long time, but I haven't gone anywhere since I've been here for a month. So I'm trying to give myself grace. So I've only been here for a month. Most of my time has been really adjusting to my new life. One of my biggest intentions by coming here was getting the chance to live more slowly, to not feel rushed while I'm here, but it's really hard to balance that when I don't know how long I'll be here and that I have this pressure in myself to make the most of this experience, whatever making the most means. I've gotten to meet other ALTs in my town, and they've been such a huge support system for me to just normalize this experience, to have them reflect on what it was like when they first arrived, and to help recognize that, yeah, those things are really frustrating, and I remember going through that, and you can get through that. To end this video off, I wanted to share a few of my tips on mindset about getting through your first month, or however long your transitional phase is when you arrive in Japan. Tip number 1, give yourself grace. You have just moved to a new country where the language, the expectations, the logistics are all different than what you're used to at home. Ask for help from your coworkers, your ALTs in your area, your supervisor, for things you don't know about, because all of this is new for you. Number 2, give yourself time. Things may be moving quicker or slower than you hope to or expect, like getting things sorted for your apartment and learning a new language. This is also tied to giving yourself grace as you're adjusting to your new life here, and of course that's going to take some time to really feel settled and comfortable. Number 3, Be open-minded. Be open to new experiences, to making lots of mistakes, to learning about this new culture that you are now a part of. Things may be different than what you imagined, but staying open allows us to receive those new experiences more easily and instead of creating resistance for ourselves in our own lives. However, this is not the same as not getting what you need in order to live well and live safely. If you aren't feeling supported in the work that you're doing, reach out to your supervisor, to other ALTs in your area so that you can communicate your needs clearly and start making progress. Number 4, it's okay to feel sad. You may be mourning your old life, whatever that life meant for you, whether that's people in your life, whether that's comforts that you used to have, whether that's the ease of what your life was like and how every mundane task in your new life feels so much harder than it needs to be. Reach out to your support system back home, to family, to friends. Seek comfort and find familiarity in what you're interested in and your hobbies. Those are the things that'll ground you as you are navigating all of the waves that come with being here. Also connect and create a support system here with other ALTs who can relate to your experience on first-hand accounts, as it can sometimes feel a little distant when you're relating to people back home and they don't fully understand what you might be going through. That's normal. So that's how my first month in Japan has been like. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. And if you're a new ALT, you've got this. You are not alone in your experiences, and you are very capable of making this through and finding your own unique way to be an ALT and to really connect with the students that you're working with. Leave a comment, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. See you! If you can hear that, that is one of our town's chimes. It rings at 7, 10, noon, 3 o'clock, and it's a different jingle every time, and it's actually really, really cute.